Hey there guys, welcome back for another Warhammer 40,000 Imperium painting video. So, this week we are playing a little bit of catch up and doing issues 12 and 13 together, seeing as issue 12 only came with paints. So in the corner you're going to find links for the review and playthrough for both issue 12 and issue 13. And the one painting video will be this one here that you are watching now, and that will be painting a Dark Angels Intercessor, or Assault Intercessor. So this is obviously from the first three Intercessors that we got back with issue 4, I think it was, issue 3, one of those two, and we had they had the shoulder markings on them, so it's the Ultramarines guys. This one I wanted in one of my Assault Intercessor squads, so I simply shaved off the markings and swapped him out for one of the guys in there. Just because he's throwing the grenade, so he's in a different pose to what every other guy in the squads are from the models that we get and I've already got. Anyway, Dark Angels. Obviously a chapter very close to my heart, and I'm going to show you a relatively easy, quick and simple way to paint them. So I've gone ahead and primed the model in black, and I'm now doing a very fast, very heavy dry brush with a mix, a 50-50 mix of Caliban Green and Warpstone Glow. This is because the Warpstone Glow would be a little bit too bright for this, and we want it just for the highlights and stuff, and the Caliban Green is a little bit too dark for dry brushing. It will just blend in a little too much with the black. So you can see here all I'm doing is pretty much leaving the under area. This is going to be in shadow, very light dry brushing there. Barely any paint on the bristles, but I am sort of pushing into the model a little bit to deposit that paint more on the top and a little bit less on the undersides. And obviously I can't get between the legs and, you know, in certain areas, but that's great because we want that dark shadow in there, so that's where the black is going to go nicely, and this green will blend or fade into that black of those shadow areas. Once that is done, I then take a 50-50 mix of Warpstone Glow and Moot Green, and with very little paint on the bristles now, so I'm dry brushing. I haven't rinsed out the brush. When I'm dry brushing with the same colours, I like to leave the previous colour in there, just make sure there's barely any left, and that helps with a little bit of a smoother blend in between the colours. And all I'm doing now is just in a sort of downwards-ish motion, I'm just catching the outside areas, anywhere that I want the light to hit on those sort of flatter, harder edges and surfaces. Again, I'm staying away from the underside of the armour now. This is just on the sort of the top areas, and then like I say, as you can see here, just sort of the top of the legs. Not too much on the underside of the legs, as you can see. I just want to get a bit of a bright highlight. Now I know this is quite bright for Dark Angels, but it will tone down with the next steps. And the next step is a wash all over with Coelia Green Shade. Now I know this has a little bit more of a blue-green to it, but because the armour is pretty dark, this the blue-green isn't going to show up too much. All it's going to do is just darken down some of the brighter green highlight that we put on there just a minute ago. So as you can see, I'm not being careful with this. I am slopping it on, getting it into all those recesses, letting it pool a little bit, you know, in the recesses, in corners and things like that. Flatter areas, I am manoeuvring it a little bit and just sort of thinning it out so that it's not leaving harsh pooling, but essentially just cover the entire model and then set it aside for about 15 to 20 minutes to dry, and then we can move on to the next steps of the model. So as you can see here, once the Coelia green shade has dried, it settles and darkens up those recesses nicely and just darkens down those highlights a little bit. That brighter green has now become a little bit more of a darker green. So I've got here some Mephiston red, and I'm going to use this on the motor part, as I call it, with the little vent on the chainsword here. I will also run this into his eyes. These will be for his eye lenses. Any purity seals, there are no purity seals as I remember on this model, or this particular model, but obviously if there are purity seals then I would throw this on there as well. And also the center, I like to think of it as a button in the middle of his belt buckle. I will put this on there as well. Next, for the blade of the chainsword, I'm using some Uriel yellow, and obviously I'm just giving this a few coats of yellow. Obviously I'm going to be doing hazard stripes on this to match up with the rest of my units. So Uriel yellow, and on black it's not the easiest to cover. I think this takes me about 4 or 5, maybe 6 layers. Obviously thinned down slightly, but yeah, it does take a little bit. I know there are easier ways to do this with other paints, but the way I see it, if you're doing 3 layers with one paint and then 3 layers with this, you're still doing 6 layers. So whether you're doing 6 layers with the same colour or 6 layers with 3 different colours, you know, it's going to add up to the same time with drying time. So I just sort of persevere with this for the most part. On better quality miniatures, you know, HQ unit single guys, then yeah, I probably would go with one of the other yellow methods, just to get a cleaner look to it. But for a regular assault intercessor, no need, just get a few layers down on there. Alright, so once the yellow has dried, I'm just using some Abaddon black to paint in any of the areas that are going to be either metallic or that should be black, such as the seals behind the legs, the elbows and things like that, as well as the handle for the sword. Next up, you can see me thinning down the black quite a bit here, and I'm going to start marking in my hazard stripes. So what I tend to do is roughly mark out where I want the middle stripe to be, and then from there I can work out the top and bottom. I like to do 3 stripes, so 3 black and 4 yellow. For the stripes, as you can see, they're not going to go in perfect first time. I do have to widen them up to try and get them even spacing, but the reason I do this with thin down black is I can adjust it with the yellow by going over, and I don't have to do 10 layers more of yellow. For the side ones, you can see I'm just bringing this down about 3 brushes width wide. It actually works out 3 teeth wide. I try to get it so it matches 3 teeth between the blacks, and the blacks are 3 teeth wide as well. So yellow and black stripes are all equal width for my hazard stripes. This side I don't do quite as good. I get it a little bit more vertical than angled on that first stripe, and I will touch that up. It is just a case of going backwards and forwards. But once you've got them marked out, you know, and you've touched up with the yellow, you can then go back in with some less thinned down black and really opaque them back up. Right, so now that I've got my hazard stripes done, I'm using some Warpstone Glow, and I'm adding in my final highlights for the armour. Now obviously I had the highlight that was the Warpstone and the Moot Green 50-50 mix. That then got darkened down a little bit, so I'm now using the pure Warpstone to give that final highlight. I still have a little bit of a highlight from the 50-50 mix. This is more your brighter edge highlight. The other way that I would do it is if I didn't do the 50-50 mix, then I would do this highlight and then use moot green as a final point highlight, but I find that can sometimes tend to look a little bit too bright, and if I'm going for a little bit more of a subtle look, then I like to do things this way. So all I'm doing here is just picking off where I think the light would sort of reflect and hit on some of those edges, and just using a fine brush and running these thin lines along those edges. So moving back to the red on the guard here, or the motor cover, I'm just using some Evil Sun Scarlet, and again that finer point brush, and just running some fine edge highlights down the model. This is just a quick sort of tabletop ready method. I think this guide takes me around about 40 minutes, 45 minutes to do, depending on whether you've got purity seals and a few extra details, but typically they take around 40 minutes per model. So this is just a quicker way of doing that without using too many shades and highlights and the rest of it. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and done the lens on the eyes already. I've shown that before. If you guys want to see it again, let me know below, and I'll do maybe a quick 2-minute tutorial on how I do lenses or something. Okay, so I'm now using some Eshin Grey, and I'm using this to highlight all of the black areas. So across each of the little ridges on the back of his leg armour, between his elbows and any joints like that, and also along the black part of his sword handle, and just generally anywhere that's going to be black, I'll use Eshin Grey as an edge highlight. So moving on to the Aquilia on the chest plate now, I'm just using some Morghast bone to get a nice opaque base tone with this. And this is the lighter bone colour. Sometimes I will use something like Ushapti bone and then go for a darker bone, but for the chest plates on my Ultramarines, Ultramarines? No, on my Dark Angels, my Space Marines, I like the Morghast bone. Following that, I'll apply a wash of Reichland Flesh Shade, and just enough to get this to sit in sort of in between each of the sculpted feathers, so that when that dries and settles down into the recesses, that just gives a bit of a darker tone to the recesses. And then as you can see, I've decided to go ahead and just throw this on the red of the chainsword, and also down the blade. Now with the blade, I'm doing it a little bit more of a glazing, and as you can see, I'm just dropping sort of a little dot of it at the base of each of the yellow stripes, and what this will do is give a slightly faded from yellow to a slightly more orangey yellow once it dries, and that just gives a little bit of a fade down or a fade off, and stops the yellow stripes looking so stripy. So for the pouches, the pistol pouch and a few of the other smaller pouches, I'm just using some Rhinox hide to give a nice brown base. I don't want to go particularly bright with this, obviously it's going to contrast too much with the darker green of the Dark Angels, so I prefer the browns to be a little bit more towards the darker side. Alright, so once the Reichland Flesh Shade has dried, you can see I've got a nice sort of two tones between the darker areas of the Reichland Flesh Shade and the stained area of the Morghast bone. All I'm doing now is using some Screaming Skull and just picking off the outer edges of each of the feathers. This is super easy to do with this. You don't have to worry too much, although the feathers do get a little close together toward the bottom, but if you're careful and use a fine enough brush with a good point, you can get a pretty good mark on each feather without sort of going between them too much. If you do sort of blob in an area, don't worry too much. Either leave it like I do, or you can go back in with a drop of ripened flesh shade and just drop it in there, and that'll again darken it down and separate the mistake. Okay, so for this next bit, I've sped up the video slightly so I can have it running so that you can see how I'm mixing the paints up. Now I'm mixing paint rather than going to a from the pot colour, just to save a bit of time and save on the number of paints that I have to use. So all I've done here is made a little light brown mix up with the Rhinox hide, the Morghast bone and the Evil Sun Scarlet, and then just marking out some sort of thick edge highlights and thicker lines across the leather. I'm now rinsing the brush, a little bit more Morghast bone, again to lighten this up, and a thinner brush this time, and I'm just stippling this down the edges and just adding in again very rough marks to act as sort of chipped away leather where it starts to reveal that lighter undersurface of the leather, or of, you know, leather pouches and things like that tend to do. So nothing overly complicated here, just some easy brush strokes, keeping them fairly thin and just on areas where the light will catch. And then finally just using some of the Screaming Skull just on the most worn areas, just to add that final little bit of edge highlight. So all that's left to do now is finish off the sword. So you can see it's got a little bit darker with the ripened flesh shade on there. And I'm now using some Flash Gitz yellow just to add an edge highlight to both the top and the bottom of the yellow stripes. And then I'll use a little bit of the Eshin Grey to do the same with the black stripes. And then finally I'm just taking some lead belcher to finish off the sword. Obviously this is going to be applied to the teeth of the sword and the parts of the backpack that will obviously have a metallic look, and also the pipes from the breather part of his helmet that runs sort of alongside where his chin would be. I do them in this as well. I don't bother staining it with a wash or anything. They're small areas, the wash isn't going to do too much to it, or at least I don't think it would, so it's not worth wasting the time or the wash doing it. And then once that is done, that will be the end of the model. Obviously I just need to apply transfers and base him up, and then obviously dirty him up to fit in with the rest of my army. If you guys want to see how I dirty them up, let me know in the comments below, and obviously I will go through that step the next time we get a Dark Angels model, and I can show you him done in a little bit more of a darker style that I would do for my army. And there he is, guys, one tabletop ready Dark Angels. Obviously he's missing his chapter and squad markings, and I haven't dirtied up his legs and his armour and that to fit in with the rest of my units, but obviously I'm just showing you guys with this video how to get a nice quick tabletop ready miniature. So that is all for today, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope that it is useful to some of you. If you have enjoyed the video, as always, please hit that thumbs up button. The more likes I get and the more you guys comment and interact with these videos, the more it works with YouTube's algorithm on putting them out there for more people to see, which obviously helps the channel grow. If you have not yet subscribed and like what you see and would like to see more from me, then please do hit that subscribe button. The more followers I get, the more it encourages me to keep making content for you guys, and obviously, you know, the goal is to try and hit that 1,000 subscribers and then move on to further goals and expand the channel. And for those of you who have recently subscribed, a huge warm welcome to the inner circle to you. Thank you ever so much for your support. I'm glad you're enjoying the content enough to hit that subscribe button. But until next time guys, that's all from me for now, so take it easy and keep painting those minis.